Hey guys, Shane here. So welcome to this inbox review of Bronco's massive 1/35th scale Airspeed AS15 Horsa Mk.1 glider. So this kit is going to be a part of a build series I'm going to do for Armorama. So I just thought I'd do an inbox review for both this channel and if Jim wants it for Armorama, so I thought I'd do it. So as you can see, this is a monstrous box. So here's my hand for size reference. It is absolutely massive, and it's also an immensely deep box. So this kit came out in 2015, and I say it's probably the largest 35th scale model that Bronco has produced to date. My god, is this a very impressive model. So I'm going to be doing a diorama for this, but more on that later. So first things first, we do get some graphics on the side of the box. Basically we get a small photo etch fret, some decals which I believe are produced by Bronco themselves. We do get decals for either the US Air Force or the RAF. On the other side of this monster box we have some CAD drawings of some of the features. So we do have an interior, we have control surfaces that you can articulate, or at least should I say you can pose them any way you want. And then we have this very large door section that can fold out, and this is if you wanted to say like have the vehicle loading up or disembarking a Jeep or what have you. You can also remove the tail section if you want to have it on the ground, and because when these things hit the ground you could unbolt the back of the tail section, take it away, and then you could drive out your Jeep or your anti-tank gun or whatever. So as you can see, this box is chock-a-block full of plastic. It's absolutely monstrous, and as you can see, the detail is going to be very nice as we go through it. So I'm going to start unbagging parts, and we're going to start taking a proper look at this kit and see what type of detail we have. Okay, starting with the instructions, we get a very nice image of the box art, and we do actually get an A4 size printout of this box art, so you could frame it if you like. Get a small bit of history. And then we start with our instructions. I am kind of hit and miss when it comes to Bronco instructions. In many regards they're more notorious than even Dragon instructions are. So we'll see how well this builds. However, this should be a pretty intuitive build, I'd imagine. So we have some basic paint callouts here for Mr. Hobby, Hobby Color, Humbrol and Tamiya. So nothing for Vallejo if you're using that. You're going to have to do a bit of research. We get a diagram of our sprue map here, if you will. So step one is going to be working on the cockpit. So we have our co-pilot and pilot chairs, various control surfaces. I believe we do get photo etch seat belts, which is nice. Some pretty small details here, like very small wing nuts here for the control columns. Then we're adding more interior parts here, some compressed air tanks, the various control pedals. I would have liked if they had given us colour callouts for these, because there's no mention of what to paint the interior. It would be RAF interior green, just from my own research, but there's no real mention of it while you're building this. We're going to step 4, and then we're moving on to our canopy with this big impressive glasshouse canopy. I do believe it does come with a mask, which is really nice. Even though I'd imagine this wouldn't be the hardest thing in the world to mask if it came down to it, if you had to do it yourself. Then we're moving into the actual interior of the fuselage with these various support ribs that will go through the entire fuselage and troop compartment, if you will. Again, step 6, we're continuing adding more and more of these support ribs. So being an armor modeler, this will build a way that we're not really used to, that we're going to have to build, paint, because there's an interior here. So it's going to be quite interesting to build this up and also paint it. So it's going to take a bit of planning and pre-thought to get the most out of this kit. Step 7, again, we're continuing with the interior. Most of the build is going to be taken up with the interior. We do get some iron weights to stop the aircraft from tail sitting, or just to throw it at someone you don't like, so you can skull someone with that if you wanted to. Step 8, we're moving on to the seating arrangement. So there is a caveat here that if you're putting one of Bronco's airborne Jeeps or any type of airborne Jeep you have, that you have to pre-think this out and make sure that you don't put the seating arrangement in that area. Again, it appears to have photo etch parts here for the seating arrangement, which is nice. And then we start moving on to actually building up the fuselage. So these come in sections and you'll glue each one of them in separately. So here's our large access door that you can have it open, pivot or closed. So you can have this on a runway and the lads driving a jeep up onto it, or unloading supplies on a landing zone. Again, the detail is pretty nice and the instructions aren't being too confusing. However, with my experience when it comes to building Bronco kits, it's not until you start cutting plastic and trying to figure out where things go does any deficiency in the instruction manual come to light. Step 12, we're moving on to the landing gear. Again, a pretty in-depth assembly here for the landing skid and wheels. The wheels are weighted, so they do have the flat bulges to represent the weight, which is nice. You don't have to buy any aftermarket or sand your own ones down. That's pretty handy. Then we're moving on to step 13, and now we're beginning to add in our fuselage sides here. I'm not entirely sure if we get masks for the little windows, but it shouldn't be too difficult to mask them. Step 15, we're moving on to the tail assembly. Again, all these have to be painted separately, or at least build one half, paint the other half, and then join it. So again, it's a little different, it's a slightly different feel of build. We do have a photo etch or plastic piece here for a little, it looks like a little support rail here or some such. So that could be a bit fiddly. Then we're moving on to our control surfaces on step 16, our elevators and our rudders. I believe these can be turned so you can pose them, which is nice. Though I don't think you can, yeah, you can pose your, oh, what are these called? Your ailerons, I believe. But still, it gives you some posability, which is nice. Step 17, we're adding our rudder and stabilizers to our tail section, adding some more detail here to the tail section of the aircraft, and then you join them together. So you can have this part separate and leave it off. Often you find photographs of these, once they've hit the ground, they can disconnect this, and that's how they drive the Jeep. Now we're moving into the wing spars and the wing assemblies. Now this is large. When you see this in plastic, this model's wingspan is pretty bloody wide. So again, I'm going to have to think about how best to display this model and actually find a place to actually fit it. I have an idea, we'll talk about that later though. Step 19, again with the wing roots, we have some very nice rib detail. So you could actually just leave the wing off on one side and have the interior wooden assembly of these wing spars inside it. That'd be very cool if you want to save space, so you only have one full wing and then a half of another wing, if you will. That's one way around it, if you're trying to fit this into a tight area, as it were. Then we're adding the upper and lower wings. We have little air brakes here that we can either have them in deployed or retracted position. 22, again, more wing details. 23, we're moving on and we're adding the wings to the fuselage and then the final top that goes on. I hope that the fit is good on this. I don't want to be doing a lot of filling with all these different panels. However, this is how the real aircraft would have been built. It would have been built in sections. So it's not too far off the original, I believe. Then we have different options here for how to have our door, have a little ladder deployed, or the larger access hatch here that just folds down. I would probably use it like that, just so you can actually model the interior of it and show it off. So 24 steps, pretty involved so far, but we'll see what the plastic's like in a few moments. And then we go on to our marking and painting guides. So we have an RAF aircraft or glider from Operation Overlord, June 6, 1944. So we do have to paint on the invasion stripes ourselves, which is fine, that's how they were done in real life. Then we have another one again from Operation Mallard, June 6th. I think that's from, is it Operation Mallard, that's Pegasus Bridge, or is it the Murrayfield Battery? It's one or the other, if I remember correctly. And then we have a US Air Force one, again for Operation Overlord. So they're all D-Day gliders, no Market Garden ones, but I believe the other kit that they have in their collection is from Market Garden. And that is our instruction manual. So far, so good. So moving on to the very large decal sheet. So these are printed by Bronco, I believe, so they're not cartograph. I'm going to keep these in their plastic because I don't want to dampen my workshop to activate these and destroy them. So you have your big stars and bars for the US Air Force and your rundles for the RAF. I'm sure if you did a Google search, there's probably masks where you could paint these on if you wanted to. But I think the decals will work fine if you have good decal softeners. We have a little bit of graffiti here, like Churchill's reply. If you look at real photographs of these gliders, they all had slogans and names and other little insults painted onto it by the paratroopers, so you can do a lot with graffiti on this if you wanted to. So on the back we have our masks, so it's nice that all the windows and all the glasswork for both the canopy and for the viewing ports are all included, so that saves you having to either make your own or buy aftermarket. We have a pretty small photo etch fret, which, what can I say, it should be fine. We'll see what happens when we come to build this later on. We get this little box of parts, and this is our iron counterweights. So we have a big chunk of carbon steel by the looks of it. It's quite hefty, that too. So you have a big counterweight. Again, there's no way in hell, even with if you had a Jeep in the back of this, that this would be a tail sitter, so you should be just fine. And that's in this little box, you don't damage any of the plastic, and a cute little Bronco symbol on it, just for added measure. Then we go on to the clear plastic. So the green work here, or the glass house here, is very clear. Very, very clear. Same here with the little portholes, again crystal clear. And again, I'm going to put these back into their bag so I don't scratch them. They are a little bit brittle, I can just tell by the feel of them, so be a little bit careful when you're cutting these out so you don't damage or chip them. And then we get this large little poster, which is actually a pretty nice little bonus, I think. So I'm going to put that up and frame that in my workshop. So it's just a simple poster of the box art. So let's have a look at the plastic. So we're going to begin looking at the plastic, and by God, is there a lot of plastic. So I'm going to go through this as quick as we can. So this is K-sprue. So we have our nose cone detail. So you will notice there's no recessed detail, because that's why, and that's because these gliders were made out of plywood and like a canvas cover over them. So there's not going to be much surface detail on the actual fuselage of the glider, but again, with some clever painting and weathering, you can make a lot of you can make it look interesting that way. So again, detail's nice. These are very big pieces of plastic. Plastic is quite thin, which is nice. However, Bronco plastic can be a bit brittle, so be a bit careful removing these from the sprue. We have our nose wheel here, if you will. Detail's nice, again pretty crisp, and we do have some nice weighed detail look here. The weighted wheels for the bulge. So again, that just saves us from having to do it ourselves. We have some different types of support strut detail here. Again, this is very fragile, so it's going to be interesting to see how well these pieces come off the sprue, or will they come off in pieces. We have some of the cockpit floor here. So you could do some cool techniques here with like hairspray techniques to have some of the bare wood showing through from where the crew have been walking on it. We have the side door here with some basic interior detail. We do have some pin marks that will have to be filled. I hope this kit's not going to be full of them. A little bit of flashing on this little ramp here, I think. This is one of the access ramps for pulling stuff up onto the glider. We have the main landing strut for the nose wheel. Again, pretty nice detail. Nice and simple, nothing too crazy. We have these parts here. These look a bit damaged. They're meant to have a slight bow or curve in them, but this one here has been warped, so we'll see how well that goes. I believe this is either the cockpit roof or cockpit floor, so you can see the internal wooden rib structure inside it, and then up top is pretty simple. You do have some cooling lines. I don't know if the camera will pick that up. You can kind of see a wave pattern here. That's just from the plastic cooling when it gets ejected from the mold. So this is obviously the cockpit floor, or the fuselage floor for the troop compartment. Again, very, very thin. Looks a bit warped, but I believe with this build some good clamps are going to be very much a necessity. We do have a lot of punch marks here. Sorry, a lot of punch marks here. They're going to have to be removed. So there's going to be a little bit of cleanup in this build. So, but you will see just the size of the sprues in this kit are massive from start to finish. We will come now to the most striking part of all the sprues, which are the wings. So as you can see, here's my hand for reference. These are massive. And this is not even the full wing. There's about another inch or so that'll fit in here that's actually connects onto the roof of the fuselage. Again, it's blank detailing internal, so you don't have any rib structure here other than these reinforcing ribs, which is just a part of the tooling of the mold. So if you want to model this thing hitting a tree or missing a wingtip, you're going to have to come in with plastic card and scratch build the actual wooden bracing that would have been inside this wing in real life. We do get obviously separate flaps, which is nice, so we can model them in the up or down position. Again, there's no real surface tension or surface detail again, but that's just because of the construction of these real gliders, and they come with the upper and lower part. Again, I'm not seeing any warping, which is impressive for a piece of plastic this big. Just a few cooling lines, but a lick of paint will hide that immediately. So there are our wing assemblies, and we have 4 of those. Then, keeping with the wings, we have our flap detail. So these are our flaps for main wings. Again, in 2 parts. We do have pin marks in the inner faces, but these are going to be glued together, so you're not going to see any of that. Very thick plastic on the sprue. Geez, I've never seen anything like that before. And again, I'm not seeing any warping or any major deficiencies or flaws. So again, these should go together pretty nicely. I have a feeling this build is going to take a lot of rubber bands. I find there's a lot of very large joints that I'm going to have to mate together. So we get 2 of G-sprue, and G-sprue has more interior detail. So we have our large landing gear wheels, again with some very nice weighted effect on it. The hubs are very nicely done, and some nice tire effect on that too, like nice treading. We have these pieces here, which I'm not entirely sure where they live, but there is a lot of pin marks in them, so that could be very tricky to try to fill and sand them. I hope these aren't visible, because that's going to be a pain in the arse. This is, I believe, the top of the fuselage. This is the wing spars. The 2 wings will fit either side into this. And then there'll be a large piece that fits into the corner here that'll have like some plastic like wood effect. So if you have one of the wings removed entirely, you can still like make it look like it just tore off its wing, or you just have it modeled that way. We have the troops seating. So actually at first I thought, looking at the instruction manual, that the seat belts were in fact photo etched, but they're not. They're molded on plastic, and they look fine. You're not going to see too much of this once it's all closed up, even with the hatch and the tail removed. So again, some nice shading and highlighting on those belts will look just fine. Then we have our portholes here, if you will, again molded separately. So we'll see how well the molding technology and the tooling of this kit is, because if there's any type of mold slip or whatever, trying to get all these parts to fit into each other correctly is going to be a nightmare, but let's hope that doesn't happen. We have a ladder here for accessing that small door on the side of the aircraft, on the side of the glider. And then with these large benches once more for the paratroopers in the back. And then we have either our co-pilot or our pilot seat, again molded on detail. Pretty nice. It's simple, but it's pretty good. The buttons look pretty nice. So again, you can always remove these and file and sand that down and put down photo etch. I know Eduard or whatever you want to call them have a resin or a photo etch set for this kit if you want to use that instead. Our control column or control yoke for our controls. Some spar detail here, some ribbing. Again, very fragile. This plastic is super thin. So again, be very careful. Make sure you have fresh blades for removing these, or you'll snap it. We have a tiny wing nut here, which is actually for bolting the control yoke to the column. We have our pedal assemblies by the looks of it. for the control column, I think, because all this is all weird to me. So that's that sprue, quite a bit going on this. And then we have a mirror of that sprue, again, G-sprue, with our second wheel, big monstrosity of a thing, and then more benching for the other side of the fuselage, as well as the co-pilot seat and control column. Then we have P-sprue. These are some very fragile details. I believe these are, I know what this is. So this is the special tread bridge for driving vehicles up onto the glider. So it's going to be like sheet metal that's been bent into shape. Very thin, nicely detailed. Sometimes with Bronco, their fidelity of detail can be a bit hit and miss. So far this has been very sharp. I guess this is like one of their flagship models, so they kind of want to show off what they can do. And so far it looks very good. Again, the only thing I can really stress is that the plastic seems somewhat brittle, so care should be taken. But as you can see, even with the tread bridge, it's really nicely done, and then these support struts are very, very nice. Should build up to quite an impressive model, I have no doubt. Then we move on to one of the smaller sprues in this kit, and this is, what sprue is this? It's not marked. Oh, MA sprue. And this is obviously our landing gear. It's very substantial, as you can see by my hand as reference. It's massive. Little bit of flashing here, but nothing too crazy. Again, there's a lot of pin marks or tabs will have to be cut off and stand flat, but that's nothing that we should not be used to. Bit of basic modeling skills and you'll be well on your way. So we have another P sprue down here with the other side of the loading ramps, and then we have end sprue. And end sprue, we're starting to move on to our fuselage sides as well as some bulkheads. So again, we have some nice interior detail. It's a little bit of burring on this, as you can kind of see in places, like here for example. And there are some pin marks, so that's disappointing, because they're going to be very tricky to fill. They're going to be very tricky to fill without like accidentally like erasing this detail. Same here again, we have pin marks and other type of like molding lines here that have to be removed if you have this side hatch open. Actually, I do believe there's a plate that goes over that, so we might get away with that. Let us hope. The interior detail here for this fuselage wall here. Again, some pin marks, a bit of liquid putty maybe, and just blend out a paintbrush, you might be okay. It's a bit disappointing, but I suppose they had to go somewhere. I would have preferred if they had them on the outside, because much easier to file and sand than in with all this internal ribbing work. But sure, beggars cannot be choosers, as they say. We have just bulkhead assembly. I believe this is on the back of the aircraft, or it's the one for the cockpit. Again, some very fine and very crisp detail. I'm not seeing any pin marks here, which is good. That's a bit of a relief. A few on the interface, but you're not going to be able to see any of that. That's fine. Same here again, but you're probably not going to see any of that. And then we have a little bit more rib detail on this bulkhead here. Now we move on to C sprue. So these are the wing spars, or the rib inserts that go into the wing spars if you leave the main wing assemblies off. So you could paint these up as like a wood effect, and basically you only have to put one or none of the wings on if you want it. Might not be the most accurate thing in the world, but it would solve some storage issues. We have some more floor detail here again. Then we have another door. Again, a lot of pin marks and flash work in the inside. So again, if you have this model open, you're going to have quite a bit of filling and sanding. That shouldn't be too bad to get alright. It's just more the pin marks that we get inside these rib details that can be an issue. Now this piece here seems okay. Doesn't seem to be any pin marks inside these ribs. That's actually very good. I'm happy to see that. We some more of these plates here. I'm not entirely sure what they are. They're probably for the wing assemblies or the interior of the wings. We have a very simple and basic instrument panel. we have our two-piece compressed gas or oxygen tanks. So again, very fine detail on these spars. Plastic doesn't seem overscaled or too thick, just perfect. So that's very nice. Now we're moving on to J sprue. So again, we have more bulkhead assemblies, pretty simple. Again, pin marks on the inner face, but I believe that should be hidden from view. Again, we have more bulkheads distributed near the tail, just by the shape of it, it kind of gives that away. We have our stabilizers. So I'm not really recognizing a lot of details here, but most of this is all interior stuff. So there's a lot of plastic, but I have a feeling this should build up actually pretty quickly. Onto D sprue. So this is literally a sprue full of bulkheads. Again, a lot of pin marks are going to have to be filed down and filled, which is a bit disappointing. However, they shouldn't be too difficult to do. Detail is pretty crisp, but it's just going to be a lot of cleaning on these and filling. Onto E sprue, and this is our rudders and our stabilizers. So again, pretty simple assemblies, and we'll see when we come around to building this to see how these build up and what the fit and joins are like. But again, I'm not seeing any warping or any pit marks or sink marks. So far so good. Then we move on to B sprue, and this is one of the larger sprues. So this is the wing spar, and that is an absolute monster. Dear God. So we have some basic little details inside, a lot of pin marks here, but I don't think any of this should be visible, at least I hope not. A little bit of flash here in this little section here. Then we have more, I believe, for the wings. Some internal ribbing, should I say, but again, pin marks that have to be, or punch marks that have to be sanded flat. So there will be a little bit of cleanup in this kit if you like it or not. Unfortunately, that's just the way it's going to go. Such a big piece of plastic is probably unavoidable. Either the glider roof or floor. Again with pin marks, but it probably will be like a floor piece that fits over this, so it shouldn't be a problem. Now we are slowly working our way through the last sprues now. So now we move on to A sprue. So this is our tail section, and this can be left off and deconnected or disconnected. As you can see, it is large, it's very big. We do have some cooling lines, again, I don't know how well the camera picks them up, but that's just from the cooling process of the plastic and shouldn't be a problem once you paint and prime the model. It'd be grand. Again, we have our internal rib structure again for the bracing of the aircraft. Some pin marks, but there's going to be a lot of parts of this hidden once you put the bulkheads across, so it won't be much of an issue. Again, just dry fit things and figure out what you need to fill and what you don't need. Then we have these monstrously big rudders. Again, here's my hand for point of reference, very large, and these are in two parts. So again, we're going to see how well these come together. There might be a bit of seams that need filling, but we'll see. Again, very nice. We'll get some nice kind of material effect here. Then we have our wing struts that fit onto the external of the aircraft to support the wings. That's very, very cool. This is an absolute beast of a model. And our last sprue, and certainly not our least, is F sprue. So we have our two forward fuselage halves on either side of the sprue, so you can see the guide line here for the wings, and then we have our little portholes and hatch. So we see what the interior detail here is like. So I'm only really seeing two small pin marks here and here, which I'd imagine you'll be able to fill those just with a little bit of liquid putty and you should be okay. We have some more spar work here for the wing struts. Again, very nice. And then I believe this is actually the skid that fits underneath the glider. Again, some pin marks that have to be filled, but at least everything here should be pretty easy to get to, I hope. Big sink mark here, that's the first major sink mark I've spotted here at the bottom of this landing skid, but again, a bit of filling and also when you put this onto a diorama, you're not going to see the underside of this unless you have the aircraft on a side or smashed to a million pieces, which I'm not going to do because this kit's far too nice for that. I have a feeling this is the internal brace that the two wings will join into the fuselage with. That's the only real explanation to this massive piece of plastic, which is good because you want that joint to be as strong as possible or the wings will sag over time, and we don't want that. Then with the other side of the fuselage, again the big support outline here for our wing strut. That's again massive piece of plastic. Detail again's pretty nice. Doesn't seem to be many pin marks or any pin marks really on this one, which is nice. Again, not having to fill those in is always a godsend. Then we have this large spring, two-piece spring assembly, or two halves should I say, and that's for the landing strut. This could be kind of tricky if you have a big dirty seam going through both sides of that spring assembly. Just trying to blend them together could be tricky, but again we're going to see all this because I'm going to film this entire build, the painting, the weathering, for Jim on Armorama, and we'll see what we find when we get into this build. So far I think it's not going to be a particularly evil build to put together. I can't see this model being particularly too troublesome. Just a little bit of filling and cleaning, and again pre-thought into what you're going to do with this kit to get the most out of it. And with this massive sprue out of the way, that is all the plastic of this kit. So there you have my inbox review of Bronco's 135th AS51 Horsa Glider Mark 1. So do check out Armorama in the near future, where there will be a full build, painting and weathering video for this. I have a few ideas we're going to do. I'm either going to do a diorama, both probably based on Normandy, and I'm either going to use a Sherman and this abandoned in a field, or use Bronco's airborne jeeps and have them unloading on an LZ or a drop zone. So I'm thinking I'm gravitating towards going for the drop zone build, but the actual build video for Armorama is going to really just focus on this. So we'll see how this builds up. It's going to be quite an adventure. It's probably one of the most exciting models I built, because I remember as a young lad watching like The Longest Day and watching the Pegasus bridge parts when the boys are gliding in, and I've always wanted to build one of these, and now I actually get to build one in my scale of choice. Now there is a few things with this kit, and the big one's going to be space. So I have a few ideas on how I'm going to display this. I'm going to display it by removing probably a quarter of one of the wings on one side, thus making it smaller, and then modeling the tail section off just to minimize the size, so I can put onto a diorama base and then get either a case or put in the storage until a point where I can display it correctly. So that'd be the only real off-put for any modeler. It's just somewhere for this kit to live. It's going to be quite large. It doesn't give me the dimensions on the box, but as you can tell by just looking at the plastic, it is pretty large. But other than that, and just it might be a little bit of fiddly cleaning and filling in certain places on this kit, but the exception of that, this should build up to a very nice model. I'm really looking forward to this. So do stay tuned. You're going to see some videos in the not too distant future. I hope to start in this once I get my Sherman for the Armored Thunderbolt group build out of the way, and that's almost finished. So in maybe a week or so, you're going to see the start of this. So again, big thanks to Jim Starkweather for Armorama for giving me the opportunity to build this. This is going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys will join me along the way, and hopefully it'll be enjoyable for you all. So I've been Shane. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, happy modeling, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.